The smell reaches Friedrich before he enters the chamber. It is a smell he has learned to recognize over 11 months of service, a combination of old blood and fresh sweat, and something else, something acrid that burns the back of the throat. The torches along the corridor create shadows that move like living things against walls stained with substances he has trained himself not to examine closely. He is 26 years old. He is a notary, trained in Latin and German, employed by the Prince Bishop of Bamberg to document legal proceedings with the precision that ecclesiastical law demands. His father held this position before him. His grandfather held it before that. 3 generations of men who wrote down what happened in rooms like the one he is about to enter. His hands are steady as he adjusts his writing materials: quill, ink, parchment, the tools of his profession. His face is composed into the neutral expression that notaries cultivate, the look that suggests he is merely recording events rather than participating in them. His stomach is empty because he learned during his first week that eating before documentation sessions leads to difficulties he prefers to avoid. The door opens from inside. A guard gestures him forward. The chamber is perhaps 30 feet across, the ceiling low enough that the larger guards must duck beneath support beams. The walls are lined with implements that Friedrich can identify by name and function because identifying them is part of his job. The strappado pulley hangs from the central beam, its rope dark with use. The rack occupies the far wall, its wooden frame worn smooth by generations of bodies. The boots, the thumbscrews, the pincers, the iron chair with its heating apparatus, all of it arranged with the careful organization of a craftsman's workshop. In the center of the room, suspended from the strappado rope with her arms twisted behind her back, hangs a woman. She is perhaps 45 years old. Her name, according to the documents Friedrich reviewed before entering, is Anna Pappenheimer. She is the wife of a traveling toilet cleaner, a woman of no particular status or wealth, a woman who would be entirely unremarkable except that 17 days ago, a dying thief confessed under torture that she had taught him magic and that she flew through the night to Sabbaths where witches coupled with demons. The thief is dead now. He was executed 3 days after his confession, but his words created a chain of accusations that has already consumed 11 people in Bamberg and shows no sign of stopping. Anna's face is barely visible through the swelling and the blood. The inquisitors have been working on her for 6 hours, according to the guard's log. She has not yet confessed. This is unusual. Most accused witches confess within the first 2 hours. The strappado alone, the sensation of arms being pulled from their sockets while the body's weight drags downward, is usually sufficient to produce whatever words the inquisitors want to hear. The addition of the other implements typically accelerates the process further. Anna has resisted for 6 hours. Friedrich takes his position at the small desk that has been placed against the wall for his use. He arranges his materials with the automatic precision of long practice. He notes the date, the 29th of July, 1600, the time, the names of the officials present, the condition of the accused. He does not note what he thinks about any of this, because notaries do not record their thoughts. Notaries record facts. Facts are what the inquisitors speak. Facts are what the accused confesses. Facts are what Friedrich writes down and signs and files in the archive, where these documents will be preserved for future reference. The chief inquisitor approaches the suspended woman. His name is Dr. Ernst von Ehrenberg, a legal scholar educated at Ingolstadt, an expert in demonology who has personally overseen the prosecution of over 200 accused witches during his career. He is 53 years old. He is holding a pair of iron pincers that have been heating in a brazier. "We will resume," he says. Anna makes a sound that might be prayer or might be something else. Her eyes are swollen nearly shut, but Friedrich can see that she is looking at something beyond the chamber, beyond the walls, beyond the men who surround her. Dr. von Ehrenberg positions the pincers. Friedrich's quill touches parchment. The next sound Anna makes is not prayer. What you are about to learn has been sanitized, minimized, and euphemized for 5 centuries. The witch trials that swept through Europe between 1450 and 1750 killed an estimated 50,000 people. Some historians argue the number exceeded 100,000, and subjected hundreds of thousands more to procedures that modern legal systems would classify as torture without hesitation. The popular imagination reduces these trials to simple ignorance. Superstitious peasants burning old women who kept cats and muttered to themselves. The reality was systematic, bureaucratic, and operated according to detailed protocols that specified exactly how accused witches should be examined, questioned, tortured, and executed. Tonight, you will learn what those protocols actually contained, how accused women were stripped naked before rooms full of men and examined for devil's marks that proved their guilt, how professional witch prickers traveled from town to town, earning money for each witch they identified, using retractable needles that guaranteed they would always find the marks they were paid to discover, how sleep deprivation was used systematically, with accused witches kept awake for days until their minds broke and they confessed to whatever their interrogators suggested. You will learn about the strappato, the rack, the boots, the heated chairs, the water torture, the thumbscrews, and the other implements that the Inquisition employed with methodical precision. You will learn that the accused were required to pay for their own torture, that families were billed for the wood used to burn their relatives, that witch hunting became an industry with economic incentives that guaranteed its expansion. You will learn about specific women, Anna Pappenheimer, Katharina Hinault, the mayor Johannes Junius, who was himself accused, and who wrote a secret letter to his daughter describing what was done to him. You will learn what happened to their bodies, their families, their communities. You will learn why the trials spread like contagion, why they consumed tens of thousands of people, why they continued for 3 centuries before finally ending. You will learn about the children who were encouraged to accuse their parents, the neighbors who testified to save themselves, the confessions that named dozens of fellow witches, each name generating a new arrest, a new prosecution, a new set of torture sessions, a new execution, the machinery of accusation that fed itself until entire communities were consumed. If you want to understand what human beings are capable of doing to each other when authority provides permission and procedure provides justification, subscribe now and comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from. Because these women were real. Their suffering was documented with bureaucratic precision, and the records survived because notaries like Friedrich wrote down everything. Anna Pappenheimer is still hanging from the strappato rope. Dr. von Ehrenberg is still holding the heated pincers. Let me tell you what happens next. The theological foundation for the witch trials was established in 1486 with the publication of the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Its author was Heinrich Kramer, a German Dominican friar who had been prosecuting accused witches for years with mixed success. Local bishops often dismissed his cases. Secular authorities questioned his methods. His obsessive focus on women's sexuality disturbed even other inquisitors, who were generally comfortable with harsh interrogation techniques. Kramer wrote the Malleus to provide theological and legal justification for what he wanted to do. The book was comprehensive, running to over 200,000 words in its complete form. It addressed every conceivable objection to witch prosecution, provided detailed instructions for identifying witches, described appropriate torture methods, and explained why women were particularly susceptible to demonic influence. The book's arguments about women are explicit. Women are intellectually weak, Kramer argued. They are emotionally unstable. They are carnally insatiable, driven by lusts that make them easy targets for demons who offer sexual satisfaction in exchange for service. The word femina meaning woman, Kramer claimed through false etymology, derived from fe, meaning faith, and minus, meaning less. Women had less faith than men. Therefore, women became witches more frequently. This reasoning was circular, self-serving, and enormously influential. The Malleus Maleficarum went through at least 28 editions between 1486 and 1600. It was consulted by prosecutors across Europe. It shaped legal proceedings for 2 centuries. It provided the template that men like Dr. von Ehrenberg followed when they examined accused witches in torture chambers across the Holy Roman Empire. The book's section on torture is detailed. It specifies that torture should be applied in stages, beginning with showing the accused the instruments and explaining their function. Many accused witches confessed at this stage, the book notes with satisfaction. Those who did not confess after viewing the instruments should be subjected to progressively severe applications until confession was achieved. The Malleus acknowledges that torture might produce false confessions. Accused witches might say whatever their torturers wanted to hear, simply to make the pain stop. The book's solution to this problem was elegant in its cruelty. Confessions obtained under torture must be confirmed the following day, without torture, for legal validity. What the book does not acknowledge is what happened to accused witches who recanted their confessions the following day. The answer, documented in thousands of trial records, is that they were tortured again, and again, and again, until they confirmed their confessions without immediately being subjected to torture, or until they died from the accumulated damage. The torture was not random cruelty. It was systematic, documented, legally sanctioned. Notaries, like Friedrich, recorded every session. Physicians sometimes attended to ensure that the accused did not die before providing useful testimony. The entire process was designed to extract specific information, names of other witches, details of Sabbaths attended, descriptions of pacts made with Satan. The information extracted under torture was then used to arrest the people named, who would be tortured until they named others, who would be arrested and tortured in turn. The system was self-perpetuating. Each confession generated new suspects. Each new suspect, under torture, generated additional confessions. The chain of accusation could extend indefinitely. Heinrich Kramer died in 1505, but his book lived on. The men who tortured Anna Pappenheimer in 1600 were following procedures that Kramer had established a century earlier. The questions they asked, the methods they used, the records they kept, all of it derived from the Malleus Maleficarum and the tradition it created. Kramer never faced consequences for what he set in motion. He died in his bed, an old man, respected within his order, confident that he had served God by creating the machinery that would kill tens of thousands of people over the following 2 centuries. The machinery worked exactly as designed. Anna Pappenheimer came from poverty so extreme that it defined every aspect of her existence. Her husband, Paulus, cleaned latrines for a living. He traveled from town to town with his family, emptying the waste pits that accumulated beneath houses and public buildings, carrying the contents away in barrels for disposal. The work was necessary but despised. The family was treated as barely human by the communities they served. They had 3 sons. The oldest, Michel, was 21 in 1600. The middle son, Gumprecht, was 19. The youngest, Hole, was 10 years old. The family was arrested together on the accusation of the dying thief. The thief, under torture, had claimed that Paulus Pappenheimer was a sorcerer who could control the weather, that Anna was a witch who flew to Sabbaths and murdered children, that the entire family participated in demonic rituals that brought plagues and crop failures to the regions they visited. The accusations made a certain kind of sense within the logic of the witch-hunting system. The Pappenheimers were outsiders, traveling from place to place. never belonging to any community. When misfortunes occurred, when crops failed, when children sickened, when cattle died, communities looked for explanations. Strangers who had passed through recently made convenient targets. The thief who named the Pappenheimers was probably trying to redirect attention away from his own crimes. Under torture, accused criminals often named others, hoping to prove their usefulness to the authorities, hoping to delay their own executions, hoping that implicating others might somehow save them. It did not save him. He was executed 3 days after his confession, but his words set the machinery in motion. The Pappenheimer family was arrested at an inn where they had stopped for the night. Guards came before dawn, surrounding the building, breaking down the door, seizing all 5 family members before they could flee. Their possessions were confiscated, not that they possessed much. Their bodies became property of the court system that would process them. Anna was separated from her husband and sons immediately after arrest. She would not see them again until the day of execution, when they would be brought together for a public spectacle designed to demonstrate the consequences of witchcraft to the assembled crowds. She was taken to Bamberg, to the cells beneath the bishop's palace, where accused witches were held before trial. The cells were designed for suffering. Dark, cold, too small to lie down fully, equipped with chains that prevented sleep. The accused were kept in these conditions for days or weeks before formal proceedings began, the deprivation itself serving as a preliminary form of torture. Anna spent 3 weeks in those cells before she was brought to the chamber where Friedrich waited with his quill and parchment. 3 weeks of darkness, 3 weeks of cold, 3 weeks of chains, and fear and anticipation of what was coming. When she was finally brought to the torture chamber, she had already been broken in ways that the formal procedures would only complete. Friedrich documents the first application of the strappado with the precision his training demands. The accused is raised by the arms until her feet leave the ground. The weight of her body pulls against the shoulder joints. The initial elevation is maintained for approximately 15 minutes. The accused makes sounds consistent with extreme distress, but does not yet confess. These are the words he writes. These are the words that will be preserved in the archive, that will be reviewed by supervising officials, that will provide legal documentation of a proceeding conducted according to established protocol. He does not write that Anna's screams echo from the stone walls in ways that make his ears ring. He does not write that her face has turned a color he has never seen on living flesh. He does not write that the sound of her shoulder joints separating is clearly audible from his position 15 feet away. He writes what the protocol requires. Dr. von Ehrenberg asks questions between applications. The questions follow a standard format, established by generations of inquisitors, designed to elicit specific categories of information. When did you first make a pact with Satan? Anna gasps that she has never made any pact, that she is innocent, that she is a good Christian woman who has done nothing wrong. This is recorded as, "The accused denies initial charges." Dr. von Ehrenberg nods to the guards. Anna is lowered to the ground, her arms allowed to hang, her body given approximately 5 minutes to recover minimal function. Then she is raised again. This time, weights are attached to her feet. The Malleus Maleficarum specifies that weights of increasing heaviness may be added to increase the effectiveness of the strappado. The guards have a selection available: iron blocks of 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds, more. They begin with 20 pounds. Friedrich watches Anna's face as the weights are attached, and she is raised again. Something happens in her eyes that he has seen before, a quality of absence, as though part of her has retreated to somewhere the torture cannot reach. The questions continue. What demons have you lain with? I have never lain with. The accused continues to deny charges. The weights are increased to 50 pounds. The session continues for 6 hours. The strappado is applied 12 times, with increasing weights. Between applications, other methods are employed. The thumb screws, the boots, which crush the bones of the feet through progressive tightening, the heated pincers, applied to sensitive areas of the body. Anna confesses nothing during these 6 hours. She screams, she weeps, she begs for death, she prays to God and the Virgin Mary, but she does not confess. This is unusual. Dr. von Ehrenberg is not concerned. He has seen stubborn witches before. He knows that resistance eventually fails. The body cannot sustain this level of damage indefinitely. The mind cannot maintain denial when the pain exceeds all capacity for endurance. He orders the session suspended. The accused will be returned to her cell, allowed approximately 8 hours to recover, then brought back for continued interrogation. Friedrich notes the suspension in his records. He cleans his quill. He organizes his parchment. He leaves the chamber before the guards remove Anna from the strappado rope because he has learned that watching the removal is somehow worse than watching the application. He walks through the corridor, up the stairs, through the palace halls, out into the summer evening where the sun is just beginning to set over Bamberg. The air outside smells of grass and cooking fires and the ordinary life of a city going about its business. Friedrich breathes deeply, trying to replace the smell of the torture chamber with something else. It does not work. It never works. The smell stays with him through dinner, which he cannot eat, through the evening prayers, which he cannot focus on, through the night when he lies awake, remembering the sound of Anna's shoulders separating. Tomorrow, he will return to the chamber. Tomorrow, the questioning will continue. Tomorrow, Anna will either confess or continue to resist, and either outcome will lead to the same destination. Friedrich knows how this ends. He has documented enough witch trials to know that they all end the same way. The only variable is how much suffering occurs before the ending arrives. The examination for devil's marks was among the first procedures applied to accused witches, often before formal torture began. The theological reasoning was straightforward. When a witch made a pact with Satan, the devil marked her body as a sign of their agreement. This mark was believed to be insensitive to pain, a spot where the devil's touch had killed normal sensation. Finding such a mark proved that the pact had been made. The accused was guilty. Torture could proceed to extract the details of her crimes. The practical application of this theology required that accused witches be stripped naked and examined by inquisitors and their assistants. The records are explicit about what this involved. Women were brought to examination rooms where groups of men waited. Their clothing was removed entirely. Their bodies were searched for any mark, mole, blemish, or discoloration that might indicate demonic contact. The search was thorough. Every part of the body was examined. The examiner's hands explored surfaces and cavities with investigative rigor. The accused woman stood or lay naked before a room of clothed men for however long the examination required, sometimes hours, as examiners debated the significance of particular marks. If visual examination did not reveal conclusive evidence, the pricking began. Professional witch prickers developed during the height of the trials. These were men who traveled from town to town, offering their services to courts prosecuting witches. They charged fees for each witch they identified. They claimed expertise in distinguishing genuine devil's marks from ordinary blemishes. Their method was simple. They carried long needles, and they pricked every suspicious mark on the accused's body. If the mark bled and the accused showed pain, it was ordinary flesh. If the mark did not bleed and the accused showed no pain, it was a devil's mark. The prickers had an obvious economic incentive to find devil's marks. They were paid for finding witches. They were not paid for finding innocent women. The more witches they identified, the more money they earned. Many prickers solved this incentive problem with retractable needles. The needles looked normal. They appeared to penetrate the skin, but the blade retracted into the handle on contact, creating the appearance of pricking without actual penetration. No blood appeared because no wound was made. The accused showed no pain because no pain was inflicted. The pricker could claim success. The court had its evidence. The accused was confirmed as a witch. Some prickers were eventually exposed. In 1662, a Scottish pricker named John Kincaid was discovered using a retractable needle and briefly imprisoned. But such exposures were rare. Most prickers completed their careers without consequences, moving from town to town, collecting fees, leaving trails of condemned women behind them. The examination of Anna Pappenheimer included pricking. The records indicate that 3 devil's marks were identified on her body, 1 beneath her left breast, 1 on her inner thigh, 1 in a location the notary described as shameful parts. Whether the pricker who found these marks used a retractable needle is not recorded. What is recorded is that the marks were accepted as evidence of her pact with Satan, evidence that supported the torture that would follow, evidence that would be cited in her death sentence. She was examined naked before a room of men who were strangers to her. She was pricked repeatedly in intimate areas of her body. She was declared a witch based on marks that may have been ordinary moles. This was procedure. This was protocol. This was documented and filed and preserved because the law required documentation of legal proceedings. The law did not require anyone to question whether the proceedings were just. In another cell, in another part of the bishop's prison, a man named Johannes Junius waits for what he knows is coming. He is 55 years old. He was, until 4 weeks ago, the burgermeister of Bamberg, the mayor of this city, a respected member of the community, a man of property and position. He has served in civic office for years. He has attended church faithfully. He has raised a family, conducted business honestly, contributed to the welfare of his neighbors. None of this has protected him. The witch trials in Bamberg have been escalating for 3 years. What began with accusations against marginal people, beggars, travelers, women of ill reputation, has expanded to consume the respectable, the wealthy, the powerful. The accusations no longer require poverty or outsider status. The accusations require only that someone, under torture, speak your name. Johannes was named by a woman he barely knew, a woman who had been subjected to the strappado until she confessed to attending Sabbaths with hundreds of other witches, until she provided a list of names that the inquisitors demanded, until she named everyone she could think of in hopes that naming others might somehow end her own suffering. She named Johannes Junius, and now Johannes Junius sits in darkness waiting for the guards to come. He has seen what happens to accused witches. As burgermeister, he signed execution orders. He attended burnings. He believed, or told himself he believed, that the courts were identifying genuine servants of Satan, that the confessions were true, that the procedures were just. He does not believe this anymore. He has heard the screaming from the torture chambers. He has seen the condition of prisoners when they are brought from interrogation sessions. He has spoken with other accused men in the cells, men who were once his colleagues and peers, men who have described in whispers what was done to them before they confessed. Johannes knows that he will confess. Everyone confesses. The only question is how much he will suffer before the confession comes. He is thinking about his daughter, Veronica. She is 20 years old, married, living in a village outside Bamberg. She has not been arrested. She has not been named in any confession that Johannes knows of. She might survive this. She might escape the expanding circle of accusation that has consumed her father. He wants to communicate with her. He wants to tell her what is happening, what he is about to experience, what his confession will mean. He wants to warn her that the confession is false, that he is not a witch, that he has never attended Sabbaths or made pacts with demons or done any of the things he will soon admit to doing. He has no paper. He has no pen. He has no way to send a message from this cell. But he begins composing the letter in his mind anyway. The letter he will write if any opportunity presents itself. The letter that will explain everything to his daughter when he is dead. The guards come for him 3 hours after dawn. The torture begins. The confession of Johannes Junius, Burgermeister of Bamberg, was obtained over 3 days of intensive interrogation. The methods applied included the strappado with weights, the boots, and a technique called squassation, a variant of the strappado in which the accused is raised and then dropped suddenly, the fall arrested just before reaching the ground, the shock transmitted through the already damaged shoulder joints with devastating effect. Johannes confessed on the 3rd day. According to the official records, he admitted to making a pact with a demon who appeared to him in the form of a woman. He admitted to attending Sabbaths where witches gathered to worship Satan. He admitted to receiving a devil's mark on his body, which examiners duly found during the naked examination that followed his confession. He admitted to using magic to harm his neighbors. He named 27 other witches whom he had seen at Sabbaths. These 27 people were subsequently arrested. They were tortured. They confessed. They named others. The chain of accusation extended outward from Johannes Junius, like ripples from a stone thrown into water. But Johannes did something that most accused witches did not do. He found a way to write to his daughter. A sympathetic guard, bribed with money that Johannes's family smuggled into the prison, provided paper and ink. Johannes wrote a letter in the margins of a document he was supposedly signing, a letter that would be hidden and delivered to Veronica after his execution. The letter survives. It is preserved in the Bamberg State Archive. It is one of the most remarkable documents from the entire witch trial period, because it describes, in the words of someone who experienced them, exactly what the procedures felt like. "Innocent have I come into prison," Johannes wrote. "Innocent have I been tortured. Innocent must I die." He described the torture in specific terms. The strappado, the weights, the executioner who twisted his arms behind his back, while guards lifted him from the ground. The squassation that made him think his body would be torn in pieces. "When at last the executioner led me back to the cell," Johannes wrote, "he said to me, 'Sir, I beg you, for God's sake, confess something, whether it be true or not. Invent something, for you cannot bear the torture which you will be put to.'" The executioner, the professional who administered torture for a living, begged Johannes to confess something false because he could not bear to continue inflicting the torture that the court demanded. Johannes confessed. He invented a story about Sabbaths he had never attended, demons he had never met, magic he had never performed. He named 27 people as fellow witches, knowing that his words would condemn them to the same treatment he had experienced. "I have never renounced God," he wrote to Veronica. "I am no witch. I am a martyr. Put your trust in God, and let not this letter be found by anyone, for they would torture everyone who knows of it." The letter was delivered. The letter was hidden. The letter survived. Johannes Junius was executed on the 6th of August 1628, one of approximately 900 people killed in the Bamberg witch trials. His daughter Veronica was never arrested. She lived to old age and presumably maintained the secret of her father's letter, which surfaced centuries later when historians began examining archival documents from the trial period. The 27 people that Johannes named were all executed. The people they named were executed. The chain of accusation continued until the trials finally ended in 1631, when invading Swedish forces during the 30 Years' War disrupted the legal machinery that had been processing witches so efficiently. The disruption was temporary. The trials resumed after the Swedish withdrawal and continued, with varying intensity, for another century. Anna Pappenheimer breaks on the 2nd day. Friedrich is there when it happens, his quill ready, his parchment prepared, his face arranged in the professional neutrality that his position requires. Dr. von Ehrenberg has modified his approach. The strappado continues, but he has added new elements. The heated chair, the application of burning sulfur to the wounds created by previous torture, techniques that Friedrich has seen before, but that still produce reactions he struggles to document with appropriate detachment. Anna begins confessing shortly after the heated chair is applied. The confession flows once it begins. Years of Sabbath attendance, pacts made with demons, whose names she provides when prompted, sexual congress with Satan himself, who appeared to her in the form of a man with ice-cold skin and a member that caused pain beyond description, the murder of children whose blood was used in magical ointments, the destruction of crops and cattle, the raising of storms, the causing of impotence in men and barrenness in women. Friedrich writes all of it down. Anna speaks for 3 hours, providing details that match the templates established in the Malleus Maleficarum. Details that generations of accused witches have provided because the inquisitors asked leading questions and because the torture continued until the expected answers were given. She names 41 other witches. Some of the names belong to people Friedrich knows, merchants whose shops he has visited, the wife of a baker who makes bread that Friedrich's household purchases, a midwife who assisted at the birth of Friedrich's nephew. He writes down the names. When the confession is complete, Anna is allowed to collapse. Guards carry her back to her cell, where she will spend the night recovering enough strength to confirm her confession the following day. Dr. von Ehrenberg reviews Friedrich's documentation with satisfaction. The confession is comprehensive. The names will generate productive arrests. The theological requirements have been met. She held out longer than most, Dr. von Ehrenberg observes. The poor ones sometimes do. They have so little to lose that death seems preferable to confession. The wealthy break faster. They have reputations, families, property, things they hope to preserve through cooperation. Friedrich nods. He has observed the same pattern. Tomorrow, she confirms the confession. Then we proceed to the execution. The execution. Friedrich knows what that means for Anna Pappenheimer. The sentence has already been drafted, pending confirmation of the confession. It specifies the manner of her death in detail that the courts consider appropriate for the severity of her crimes. She will be stripped naked and paraded through the streets of Munich, where her family was originally arrested. She will be subjected to public torture during this parade. 6 applications of red-hot pincers to her arms and breasts. Her right hand, the one that allegedly signed the pact with Satan, will be cut off. Her flesh will be torn from her body while she is still alive. Only then will she be burned at the stake. Her husband and 2 older sons will be executed simultaneously, subjected to similar though slightly less elaborate tortures. The wheel will be applied to their bodies before the burning. Her youngest son, Hoel, is 10 years old. He is too young for adult execution. Instead, he will be forced to watch what happens to his family. Then, according to the sentence, he will be executed by hanging. Friedrich has documented executions before. He has stood in crowds watching condemned witches burn. He has recorded the official observations, the manner of death, the behavior of the accused, the satisfaction of justice. He has never before documented the execution of a 10-year-old child. He does not know how he will write those words. He does not know how he will continue afterward. He does not know anything except that tomorrow the confirmation will happen, and then the execution will happen, and then the next set of arrests will happen based on the 41 names that Anna provided. And the machinery will continue operating exactly as designed. The economic structure of the witch trials created incentives that virtually guaranteed their expansion. Accused witches were required to pay for their own imprisonment, their own torture, and their own execution. The costs were itemized with bureaucratic precision. Cell rental, a specific amount per day. Food, billed separately, at rates higher than food cost outside the prison. Torture. Each session had its price, with different implements commanding different fees. the executioner's services, a substantial sum that varied based on the complexity of the execution method. Families of accused witches received invoices. If they could not pay, property was confiscated. If property was insufficient, debts might be pursued against relatives or heirs. The officials involved in witch prosecutions received portions of these fees. Inquisitors collected salaries from confiscation proceeds. Jailers earned income from cell rentals. Executioners were paid per execution. Even notaries like Friedrich received compensation calculated against the number of proceedings they documented. The system created financial motivation to find witches. A town without witch prosecutions generated no witch prosecution revenue. A town with active prosecutions generated fees, confiscations, and employment for an entire apparatus of legal and correctional personnel. When accused witches named others under torture, they generated new prosecutions. New prosecutions meant new fees. The revenue stream was self-perpetuating as long as accusations continued to produce additional accusations. Some prosecutors became wealthy from witch trials. In Bamberg, the trial machinery was so profitable that it operated continuously for years, processing hundreds of accused witches through a system designed to extract maximum value from each one. The accused paid for the ropes that bound them. They paid for the wood that burned them. They paid for the paper on which their confessions were recorded. The financial records of the Bamberg trials survive alongside the confession records. They show exactly what each execution cost. They show whose property was confiscated. They show how the revenue was distributed among officials who had every reason to ensure that prosecutions continued. The records show that Anna Pappenheimer's family was too poor to cover execution costs. The debt was recorded against her son's future labor, which the court expected to claim once appropriate penalties had been applied. The 10-year-old Hole Pappenheimer was thus legally in debt for the execution of his family before he himself was hanged. The accounting was precise. The accounting was documented. The accounting was filed in archives where it remains available for historians to examine. The accounting tells us exactly how much it cost to torture and burn a family of toilet cleaners. Katharina Hino was not poor. She was 54 years old in 1627, the postmistress of Cologne, manager of a postal system that her family had operated for generations. She was wealthy, connected, influential. She corresponded with aristocrats. She handled communications that affected commerce and governance across the region. None of this protected her. The accusations against Katharina began with a dying nun who claimed that Katharina had bewitched her. The nuns' convent had experienced mysterious illnesses, convulsions, visions, symptoms that physicians could not explain. The nuns decided that witchcraft was responsible. The nuns needed a witch to blame. Katharina was arrested on the 9th of January, 1627. Her case differed from Anna Pappenheimer's in important ways. Katharina had resources. She had connections. She understood legal procedure and mounted an aggressive defense. She hired lawyers. She appealed to higher authorities. She pointed out irregularities in the prosecution's case. She argued that the evidence against her did not meet the standards required by law. None of it mattered. The torture began despite her protests. The examination proceeded despite her legal objections. The protocols established by the Malleus Maleficarum were applied regardless of her social status. Katharina was stripped naked and examined before the inquisitors. Her body was searched for devil's marks. She was pricked with needles to identify areas of demonic insensitivity. The records indicate that marks were found. The torture escalated through the standard progression: strappato, weights, boots, thumb screws. Each application was documented. Each session was legal. Katharina resisted longer than most. Her resistance became famous, a woman of education and status, refusing to confess despite intensive torture. maintaining her innocence through session after session of what the records describe as vigorous interrogation. She resisted for 3 months. She never confessed. On the 19th of May, 1627, Katharina Hainaut was executed anyway. The court determined that her refusal to confess was itself evidence of demonic protection, that Satan was shielding his servant from the pain that would break an ordinary person. Her resistance proved her guilt more effectively than confession would have. She was strangled and then burned, a standard execution method that represented minimal mercy. The strangling killed her before the flames reached her living flesh. Her property was confiscated. Her family was ruined. Her name was added to the list of confirmed witches whose souls were lost to eternal damnation. Centuries later, in 2012, the city of Cologne formally exonerated Katharina Hainaut, declaring her innocent and apologizing for her execution. A street was named in her honor. A plaque was erected. The exoneration came 385 years too late. Friedrich completes his documentation of Anna Pappenheimer's confession and walks home through streets that look exactly as they looked yesterday, that will look exactly the same tomorrow, that give no indication that beneath them operates a machinery for destroying human beings, according to carefully maintained legal protocols. His wife is waiting when he arrives. Her name is Margaretha. She is 23 years old, younger than Friedrich by 3 years, the daughter of a guildmaster who approved their marriage because Friedrich's profession offered stability and respectability. She does not ask about his work anymore. During his first months as a notary to the witch trials, Friedrich tried to discuss what he witnessed. He needed to speak about it. He needed someone to confirm that his reactions were normal, that his horror was appropriate, that the procedures he documented were as monstrous as they seemed. Margaret listened. She grew pale. She stopped sleeping well. She started flinching when he returned home, unable to look at him without seeing reflections of what he had described. He stopped talking about it. Now they communicate about practical matters, household accounts, market purchases, her pregnancy, which has recently become visible, the child that will be born in approximately 4 months, the child that Friedrich cannot think about without also thinking about Hole Pappenheimer, 10 years old, sentenced to watch his family tortured and burned before his own execution. The bread was stale today, Margaretha says. The baker's wife, she stops. Friedrich knows why she stopped. The baker's wife is one of the names that Anna provided. The baker's wife is one of the 41 people who will be arrested based on testimony extracted under torture. The baker's wife may be in a cell already, waiting for her own interrogation to begin. I should buy from a different baker, Margaretha says quietly. Friedrich does not respond. He does not know what to say. He does not know how to explain that changing bakers will not protect them, that the accusations follow chains of association that can connect anyone to anyone, that his own position as a court notary provides no immunity if someone decides to name him. He has seen wealthy men accused. He has seen city officials accused. He has seen priests accused. The machinery consumes whoever is fed into it. He lies awake that night, Margaret breathing softly beside him, the child in her womb shifting occasionally with movements Friedrich can feel through her skin. He thinks about Johannes Junius, the burgomaster who wrote a secret letter to his daughter. He thinks about the words, "Innocent have I come into prison, innocent have I been tortured, innocent must I die." He wonders if he will someday write similar words. He wonders if Marguerite will receive such a letter. He wonders if their child will grow up knowing that their father was executed as a witch, another name on a list, another victim of a system that Friedrich has spent 11 months helping to operate. He does not sleep. In the morning, he returns to the torture chamber to document Anna Pappenheimer's confirmation of her confession. She confirms everything. She adds additional details. She weeps and trembles and begs for the mercy of death and Friedrich writes it all down, and the sentence is confirmed, and the execution date is set. The 29th of July, 1600. The entire Pappenheimer family will die publicly in Munich. Friedrich will not attend. Notaries are not required at executions. His documentation ends when the confirmation is recorded and the sentence is passed. But he will hear about it. Everyone will hear about it. The execution of the Pappenheimers is designed to be memorable, designed to demonstrate the consequences of witchcraft to the largest possible audience, designed to terrify the population into compliance. It is designed to work. The execution of the Pappenheimer family took place on the 29th of July, 1600, before a crowd estimated at thousands. The procession began at dawn. Anna, her husband Paulus, and their 2 older sons were stripped naked and placed in a cart that wound through the streets of Munich. Along the route, executioners applied red-hot pincers to their flesh. The sentence specified 6 applications for Anna, concentrated on her arms and breasts. The crowd watched. The crowd cheered. The crowd had been told that these were witches, servants of Satan, enemies of God and humanity. The suffering was deserved. Anna's breasts were torn from her body with the heated pincers, while she was still conscious, still aware, still capable of experiencing what was being done to her. The wounds were not treated. The procession continued. At the execution site, the procedures continued according to the sentence. Paulus and the older sons were broken on the wheel, their bones systematically shattered with iron bars while they remained alive. Anna's right hand was cut off. The hand that had allegedly signed the pact with Satan, her flesh was torn with the pincers again. The family was then impaled on stakes, and the wood was lit. Burning to death is not quick. The flames begin at the extremities, at the wood stacked around the base. The heat rises slowly. The smoke causes choking before the fire reaches vital organs. Death can take 15 to 30 minutes or longer, depending on how the pyre is constructed and how the wind blows. The records indicate that Paulus and the older sons died within approximately 20 minutes. Anna lived longer. The records indicate that she remained conscious, remained screaming, for approximately half an hour before she finally went silent. Howell, the 10-year-old, was forced to watch all of this. The sentence required that he witness his family's execution before his own death was carried out. When his family was dead, when the flames had reduced them to unrecognizable remains, Howell was hanged. The hanging was quick. The drop broke his neck. He died faster than his mother had. The crowd dispersed. The authorities pronounced satisfaction that justice had been served. The machinery continued operating, moving to the next set of arrests, the next set of interrogations, the next set of executions. The 41 people that Anna had named under torture were processed through the system over the following months. Most confessed. Most named others. Most were executed. The chain of accusation extended outward until it had consumed over 900 people in Bamberg alone. The trials eventually ended, but not because anyone decided they were wrong. They ended because of exhaustion, because of war, because of political changes that disrupted the machinery, because of intellectual movements that slowly questioned the theological foundations of witch prosecution. The 30 Years' War devastated the Holy Roman Empire between 1618 and 1648. Armies marched through territories where witch trials had flourished. Courts were disrupted. Officials were killed or displaced. The infrastructure that had supported systematic prosecution was damaged. After the war, some regions resumed trials, but the intensity never returned to pre-war levels. The population had been decimated by war, famine, and plague. There were fewer people to accuse. There were fewer officials with the capacity to prosecute. There were fewer resources to fund the apparatus. Enlightenment philosophy, emerging in the late 17th and 18th centuries, provided intellectual ammunition against witch prosecution. Thinkers questioned whether demonic intervention was real, whether confessions extracted under torture were reliable, whether the entire framework of witch belief could withstand rational examination. The legal requirements for witch prosecution were gradually tightened. Torture was restricted, then prohibited. Spectral evidence, testimony about dreams and visions was excluded from courts. The standards of proof were raised to levels that made conviction difficult. The last execution for witchcraft in the Holy Roman Empire occurred in 1775. Anna Goldie, a Swiss woman, was beheaded after being accused of witchcraft by her employer's family. By then, the trials had claimed somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 lives across Europe. The precise number is impossible to determine, because many records were destroyed, because many trials went undocumented, because many deaths were not formally classified as witch executions. The survivors, and there were survivors, people who were accused but not executed, people who were tortured but not killed, people who lived through the experience and emerged into a world that preferred to forget what had happened. The survivors carried their trauma in silence. There are no memoirs from accused witches who survived. There are no detailed accounts of what the experience felt like from the perspective of those who endured it. The voices of the victims have been almost entirely erased. What remains are the voices of the perpetrators, the records kept by notaries like Friedrich, the legal justifications written by inquisitors like Dr. von Ehrenberg, the theological frameworks created by men like Heinrich Kramer. The victims' silence is not accidental. They had no platform to speak from, no audience who wanted to hear, no language for experiences that exceeded normal human comprehension. They suffered and they died, and they were forgotten, except as names on lists, except as numbers in statistics, except as examples of what happens when authority provides permission for atrocity. Friedrich serves as a court notary for another 26 years. He documents hundreds of witch trials. He records thousands of hours of testimony extracted under torture. He writes down confessions that he knows are false, names that he knows will condemn innocent people, sentences that he knows will result in suffering beyond anything he can articulate. He does not protest. He does not resist. He does not do anything except what his position requires. His child is born healthy in the winter of 1600, a daughter whom Margaret names Elizabeth. She grows up in a household where her father never speaks about his work, where her mother never asks, where silence covers everything that happens in the chambers beneath the bishop's palace. Elizabeth marries at 19, moves to another town, raises children of her own. She never learns the details of what her father spent his life documenting. Friedrich retires in 1626, when his hands become too unsteady for the precise writing that court records require. He lives another 8 years, dying in 1634 at the age of 60. His personal papers, discovered after his death, include fragments of something that might have been a memoir, unfinished pages that describe the torture chamber, the smell, the sounds, the faces of women whose confessions he recorded. The pages break off mid-sentence, as though Friedrich could not bring himself to continue, could not find words for what he was trying to describe. One page contains a single sentence, written and crossed out and written again. I did not stop it. The papers were burned by his family. Such documents were dangerous. Association with witch trials, even as a court official, could attract suspicion. It was safer to destroy evidence of involvement than to preserve records that might invite questions. The official records survived. The trial documentation that Friedrich compiled was filed in archives that were maintained for centuries. Historians have examined these records, counted the names, reconstructed the scale of what occurred. Friedrich's private thoughts were erased. Only that one sentence survived, noted by a family member who found it before the burning, who recorded it in a letter that eventually reached an archive of its own. I did not stop it. The witch trials reveal patterns that extend beyond their specific historical context. They demonstrate how legal systems can be constructed to produce predetermined outcomes. The torture guaranteed confessions. The confessions generated accusations. The accusations produced arrests. The arrests led to torture. The cycle was self-perpetuating by design. They demonstrate how ordinary people become complicit in atrocity. Friedrich was not a monster. He was a professional doing his job. He was following procedures established by his predecessors. He was operating within a system that he did not create and could not realistically have challenged. The guards who applied torture were not monsters. The executioners who burned the condemned were not monsters. The crowds who watched were not monsters. They were ordinary people, participating in activities that their society had defined as legitimate, justified by theological frameworks that made atrocity seem holy. The trials demonstrate how vulnerable populations become targets. Women were accused far more often than men. The poor were accused more often than the wealthy. The marginal, the outsiders, the travelers, the people who did not fit neatly into community structures, became convenient explanations for misfortunes that communities needed to explain. The trials demonstrate how economic incentives can drive persecution. When officials profited from prosecutions, prosecutions expanded. When accused witches paid for their own torture, the torture apparatus became self-funding. When confiscated property enriched the courts had motivation to target the propertied. The trials demonstrate how children can be weaponized. Children who accused adults were believed. Children's testimony sent women to execution. Children learned that accusation was power, that naming witches earned approval, that participating in the system provided safety within it. The trials demonstrate how atrocity becomes normalized. The first execution shocks. The 10th is routine. The 100th is barely noticed. The machinery operates so smoothly that participants stop questioning whether the machinery should exist. These patterns appear throughout history. They appear in different forms, with different justifications, targeting different populations. But the underlying dynamics, the self-perpetuating systems, the complicit officials, the vulnerable targets, the economic incentives, the weaponized children, the normalization of horror, these dynamics recur whenever authority provides permission for persecution. Understanding the witch trials is not merely historical curiosity. It is recognition of what human systems are capable of, what ordinary people can become complicit in, what happens when questioning stops and procedure takes over. The women who died in those trials were real. Their suffering was real. Their stories have been largely forgotten because the mechanisms of erasure are effective. Official histories prefer to minimize atrocities. Communities prefer to forget complicity. Descendants prefer not to know what their ancestors did. But the records survive. The names survive. The documentation survives because notaries like Friedrich wrote everything down with the precision that legal procedure demanded. We know what happened because the perpetrators kept records. Anna Pappenheimer's name appears in multiple archives. The trial records document her arrest, her examination, her torture, her confession, her execution. The financial records document the costs of her prosecution and the confiscation of her family's meager possessions. The execution records document the specific methods applied to her body and the duration of her suffering. She is not forgotten. She is recorded. She is preserved in documentation that was never intended to honor her, but that nevertheless ensures that her existence cannot be denied. She was a human being. She had a life before the accusations, a life spent traveling with her family, cleaning latrines, raising children, enduring the contempt of communities that used her family's services but despised their profession. She was accused by a dying thief who was trying to redirect suspicion from himself. She was tortured by professionals who applied established protocols with practiced efficiency. She was executed in a spectacle designed to terrorize the population into submission. She confessed to things that never happened, because the alternative was continued torture with no end in death regardless. She named 41 innocent people because naming was required, and because after sufficient torture, the mind provides whatever is demanded of it. She watched her sons die. She watched her husband die. She died slowly, over approximately 30 minutes, while a crowd cheered. Her youngest son was 10 years old. He watched everything before they hanged him. What does this history demand of us? It demands that we remember, that we speak the names, that we refuse to let erasure succeed. It demands that we recognize the patterns, that we see how systems can be constructed to produce predetermined horrors, that we understand how ordinary people become complicit through procedure and permission. It demands that we question, that we do not accept legal frameworks simply because they are legal, that we examine the incentives embedded in systems, that we ask who benefits and who suffers when authorities claim the right to persecute. It demands that we listen to the accused, that we doubt confessions extracted under duress, that we recognize that the powerless will say whatever the powerful demand if the alternative is sufficient suffering. It demands that we protect the vulnerable, that we recognize how persecution targets those who are already marginalized, that we refuse to participate in systems that use the different, the poor, the outsider, as convenient explanations for collective misfortunes. It demands that we speak, that we do not maintain the silence that enables atrocity, that we risk the costs of questioning when questioning is dangerous. Friedrich wrote, "I did not stop it." These words could be spoken by countless people throughout history who witnessed atrocity and did nothing, who documented horror without protesting it, who maintained professional detachment while human beings were destroyed according to procedure. The words are not an excuse, they are a confession. Friedrich could not have stopped the witch trials. He was one notary in one court in one city, in a system that spanned a continent and operated for 3 centuries. His refusal to participate would have resulted in his replacement, not in the system's reform. But his participation was still participation. His documentation was still documentation. His signature on trial records was still a signature that confirmed legal validity, that moved accused witches one step closer to execution, that helped the machinery function. He did not stop it, but he also did not refuse, and the difference between what he did and what he might have done is where moral responsibility resides. The trials ended. The last witch was executed in the Holy Roman Empire in 1775. The legal foundations of witch prosecution were gradually dismantled. The theological frameworks that had justified centuries of killing were abandoned. The sites where witches were burned are now parks, parking lots, shopping centers. The chambers where women were tortured are tourist attractions, or sealed ruins, or completely forgotten. The records are filed in archives that scholars sometimes visit. The descendants of the accused, and everyone in Europe is statistically descended from someone who was affected by the witch trials. The descendants do not generally know their connection to this history. The names have been forgotten. The family trauma has been submerged. The silence that began during the trials has continued for centuries. But the records remain. The names remain. The evidence of what was done remains available for anyone who wants to look. Anna Pappenheimer, Johannes Junius, Katharina Henno, thousands of others whose names fill archives across Europe. They were real. They suffered. They died. They deserve to be remembered. Subscribe if you want more hidden histories exposed. Comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from. Share this video with anyone who believes that legal systems always pursue justice, that religious authority always serves moral purposes, that what happened in the past could never happen again. It happened. It was documented. The documentation survives. The documentation tells us that ordinary courts, operating under established legal frameworks, with trained professionals applying standard procedures, systematically tortured and killed tens of thousands of people for crimes that were physically impossible. It tells us that economic incentives drove persecution, that vulnerable populations were targeted, that confessions were manufactured through methods that guaranteed false testimony, that children were weaponized against parents, that communities destroyed themselves through chains of accusation that could consume anyone. It tells us that Friedrich sat in the torture chamber with his quill and his parchment and wrote down everything he witnessed without attempting to stop it. It tells us what human beings are capable of when authority provides permission, when procedure provides justification, when questioning becomes dangerous and silence becomes survival. Remember Anna Pappenheimer. Remember her face in the torchlight, the moment before the procedures began. Remember that she was innocent, that her confession was extracted through torture, that her death was murder committed according to legal protocols. Remember her. Remember them all.